Welcome back. This is Daybreak, and we're now in the newspaper review segment of the program, starting, of course, with the Daily Trust newspaper. From the very top, you see palliatives. Federal government approves 180 billion naira for state. Beside that, there's a story of military says 3 officers, 22 soldiers killed by terrorists in Niger. Also, Nigeria complex but not too difficult to manage. That's according to the president, Bola Ahmed Tinubu. And for the lead story, Niger, AU opposes military action as ECOWAS readies forces. Malls suspension. Protest in Ghana, recruitment drive of volunteer fighters in Niamey. Also, Abuja housewife bursts into tears as Baru Pusha escapes with her foodstuff. That's an unfortunate situation there. You can get that story on page 16. Also, Jega to lead Carter Center election observation mission to Zimbabwe. Also, address forex challenges, other fiscal issues, experts tell Edun. And at the bottom of the page, bribery allegation hits up Kano Election Petitions Tribunal. Staff induced with 10 million naira. NBA demands identity of indicted lawyers. And finally, Kano government APC trade words. You could read up on more of that story on page 14. And that's it for the front page of the Daily Trust this morning.
All right, let's move to the Punch newspaper today. The latest story there says Labour folds 180 billion naira palliatives, says governments or governors will frustrate the program. The writers there says states to get 180 trucks of rice. NLC, TUC worry politicians will hoard these materials. NEC committee to meet Labour over subsidy relief. Tinubu appeals to Nigerians. Now, this story you find on page 2 of the newspaper. Below that, there's a pictorial of Emefiele, and the story says, Emefiele, DSS drops firearms charges, 6.9 billion naira fraud case adjourned. At the bottom of that newspaper there, you see military mourns 25 soldiers killed in Niger and hunts bandits. Family folds release of Lagos chief's suspected killer. Rains disrupting Lagos-Ibadan Expressway constructions. That's according to the federal government. At the top of the page there, it says banditry, North Central, Northwest, plunge into 902 billion naira debt. Poor revenue persists. Low IGR linked to insecurity, and 60% of affected states lack FDIs. You'll find all the stories on page 12 of the newspaper there. Federal government begins ministers designate documentations on Saturday. All the stories you find on the Punch and more.
And for the Nation newspaper, top of the page, Toby Amuson cleared for World Championship. Also, Niger, ECOWAS activates standby force, defense chiefs in Ghana. Transcorp consolidates power delivery in Africa. And also, Ganduje leads Uzodinma Okorocha to Aso Villa. Below the masthead, we see a lead story. But before that, Commissioner Ondo debt down to 92 billion naira. And also, Kwara pays 150 million for girl child education. For the lead story, as is on other newspapers, states are awash with 180 billion naira subsidy pain relief cash. Federal government's 5 billion naira per state fund to immediate use to cushion high food fertilizer prices. NEC OK's transfer of World Bank $800 million to the poor. Talks with Labour to go on. And to other stories, DHQ, 3 officers, 33 soldiers died in Niger ambush. NAF jet crash. Experts, AK-47 can't shoot down jet. And also, Emefiele charged with fraud, abuse of office, others in Abuja. Arms possession suit struck out in Lagos. And finally, at the bottom of the page, Agbakoba, Amadi, Bwala, others OK ministers portfolio. You could get that story on page 30. And that's it for the Nation newspaper.
All right, we'll move to the Guardian newspaper this morning. Below the masthead, it says ECOWAS defense chiefs declare readiness to invade Niger. Lobbyists storm APC secretariat, beg Ganduje for appointments, okay? Relief as AIU clears Amusan to participate at World Championship. You find this interesting story on page 2 of the newspaper. The major story there says, reign of yesterday's men. Multiple ex-governors turn godfathers on settling the governance in the state. Now, this story you'll find on page 4 and 5 of the newspaper. There's pictorial of the ex-governors and the present governors of some states that was, hand over accordingly. And APC, NNPP trade blames over attempts to bribe election tribunal. DHQ confirms 36 soldiers killed in Niger ambush. Naira gains about 15% as dealers dump dollar accounts losses. There's a business story you find on page 16. Now, these are some of the stories on the Guardian newspaper this morning.
And for the blueprint, fuel subsidy removal. I was written in red. Nigerians urge transparency as federal government okays 185 billion naira lifeline to states FCT. Involved CSOs, media, religious community leaders, Sislak, Jide will be strict, transparent on $800 million loan disbursement, FG assures. Says part of 500 billion naira will go to SMEs, industrial sector, purchase of buses, plans palliative for refugees from Niger Republic. You can catch that story on page 6, and you can see a pictorial of some state governors, who attended the National Economic Council meeting on Thursday. We lost 36 personnel in Niger ambush, helicopter crash, according to the Defense Headquarters. Also, at the top of the page there, we see November 11 Imo governorship poll, Army to deploy 2,300 personnel. And that's according to the Resident Electoral Commissioner. And also, National Guber Tribunal, PDP star witness admits inflating figures against APC. That story is on page 7. And finally, at the bottom, Niger coup, ECOWAS ready to deploy standby forces if, according to the defense chiefs, foreign powers interested in looting Nigeria, Niger's resources. And that's according to El Zakzaki. You could also catch that story on page 6. And that's it for the Blueprint newspaper.
And let's move to the Vanguard newspaper this morning. From the top there, it says credit to government rises further by 3.5% to 32.3 trillion naira. Emefiele, federal government showing signs of disobeying court orders. That's according to the judge. Court strikes out firearms possession charge. All the stories you find on page 3. Subsidy removal, no instant solutions to Nigeria's problem. That's according to Tinubu. Transcorp acquires 60% stake in Abuja Disco. You find this on page 19. Major story says, we will invade Niger if diplomacy fails. That's according to ECOWAS. That's pictorial there of certain events that happen. And we're seeing the former president, that's good luck, present in that event. So below the pictorial, we have subsidy removal. Federal government shocked over high food transportation cost. Okay, approves 5 billion naira, 5 trucks of rice to each state, mandates NEMA to distribute food items to states sharing borders with Niger, says refugees from Niger Republic flood Nigeria. And only 2 billion naira released yet, says Governor Sani. You'll find this on page 25. Now, flood, we are burdened by over 6,000 IDPs. That's according to the Niger government. Over 1,680 Nigerian schools children kidnapped since Chibok incident. This was said by the SCI. You find this on page 9. And we have club owners tax new sports minister, Senator Eno, on football development. You find this on page 29. Now, these are some of the stories on the Vanguard newspaper this morning.
And that's the much we could take on newspaper headlines. Now, joining us in the studio to help share perspectives on some of the headlines which we have read to you, we have Mr. Nuruddin Abdullah. He is the editor at 21st Century Chronicle. So Nuruddin, welcome to Daybreak.
Good morning, Mr.
Good morning. So let me quickly pick up the Daily Trust because, of course, palliatives, federal government approves 180 billion naira for states. Of course, we knew this was, the outcome of the National Executive Council meeting, which held yesterday. So each state is supposed to get 5 billion naira, and this headline is replicated across almost all the newspapers that we read out this morning. So the question, 5 billion naira, is it enough?
Certainly, no. Take Kaduna, for instance. There is, I think, the population of about 8 million. And the breakdown, what the papers reported, is saying that 5 trucks of rice, right? 100,000 50 kg bag of rice, 48,000 bags of maize. Kaduna has 23 local governments share these bags of rice and maize. And the other was so opaque fertilizer. I don't know how fertilizer came into the palliative matter. The states and the local government should have planned for this, the fertilizer issue. Understand? I don't know why they're bringing palliative. Don't even go to Kano with a population of roughly maybe 13 or maybe 15 million. And you're sending 100,000 bags of rice, 48,000 bags of maize. How do you share it? Let's go back to the COVID palliative. You remember the car COVID? The private sector guys, Dangote, Boa, the big guys gathered money and gave it to the federal government. How you saw what happened? Who is going to share this? Same government? These governors, they have failed, they have, let me say, forcefully dragged their citizens to the squalor. Okay, let's probably, barring any last minute change, which is almost impossible, there are commissioners in the state. Where I come from, there are about 100 special advisors and senior special assistants. About half of that figure, head of agencies. I'm not talking about political hang-arounds. I'm not talking about a party executive at the state, at the zonal and the local government ward level. Who's going to share it? We saw what happened to the palliative. When some mob, you understand, bulldoze their ways into the... In Kaduna, we saw spaghetti in the houses of commissioners, party leaders. Some have been decaying. So that call to question, what are actually, for how long can this be? About 2.6 billion of the amount is grant. The remaining 2.7 point something is loan payable in 20 months. And I saw people hailing it. For how long can this be? More than half of the country's population are desperately poor, if I use it, desperately poor. The recent reforms, fiscal reforms, is equally pushing people to the cliff. You understand? So, 100,000 bags of rice to Kano. That's laughable.
So, Mr. Nuruddin, I want you to help paint a vivid picture of what it's like outside, because, you know, it's one thing to talk about how the palliatives might not be enough, but it's another thing to understand how the lifestyle of an average Nigerian is. Take, for instance, let's not go too far, say in the rural communities where, you know, people would normally be farmers, as we know in the time past, and would eat what they grow. But we've seen that trend change over time to the extent that many people are coming to the urban settlement to do other jobs that might not necessarily be farming. So how have Nigerians been surviving in these times, especially with the current situation?
Take Niger State, for instance. It's an agrarian state, right? Are you talking about farming in Zungeru, Meshegu, Shiroro area? You know, there is a belt, about 4 local governments. Are we talking about any farming there? Are we talking about farming in Birnangwari or some Zamfara areas? No. Banditry, you know, which is now resurgent, has pushed people away. In Zamfara, Sokoto, Katsina areas, you know, bandits impose taxes on people. For the people of village or community A, for you to farm this year, you have to give us
So amount
5 million, as the case may be. It is your business how you get it. And they have a timeline, you remember. There are backlash where people fail to do this thing, and there was, you understand. Look at the weather. It's a rain-fed farming we're doing. Heavily subsistent, just hoeing. Not more than 3 weeks ago, in states like Zamfara, Katsina, even Zari here, don't even go to Borno Yobe. We saw pictures of imams, traditional rulers, leading prayer for rain, which is another negative signal. Last week, if you look at the forecast by NIMET, they said that about 19 states or more will suffer heavy flooding. Resurgence of banditry, about 36 military officers and men were gunned down by these people. You see the DSS alert that these people are massing around this area, trying to attack, that train and what you feel. All this affect our food security ecosystem. Did you find out why, for instance, the prices of chicken, eggs, went up? Many smallholder poultry farmers were sent out of the business because of the feed, because they have to import maize. And you don't get any forex. So, all these things add up. Not to talk about the ongoing reform by the Tinubu administration, you understand, which already made this very negative scenario. The governors, unfortunately, again, we put the cart before the horse. All this grappling, palliative, whatever, should have been done before the subsidy was removed. But now we are just, trial and error.
But then the president says Nigeria is not too Nigeria is complex but not too difficult to manage. This is on the Daily Trust, and let me quickly read the quote. This country is complex but can never be too difficult to manage. Our diverse cultures and religion constitute a source of our strength. The president said the current pain caused by the removal of fuel subsidy is temporary, stressing that the pain will soon go with the rolling out of the palliative. So is it this same palliatives we've been talking about, or is probably another palliative that is most likely or more likely to come maybe subsequently? I want to know. Besides, the president stated this at a book launch here in Abuja, where he was represented by the Secretary to the Government of the Federation. So let's go back to the conversation.
Okay, in Hausa there is this saying that a beautiful Friday, you'll see the sign on Wednesday.
On Wednesday.
Interesting. Okay.
So I
it's
don't
not
want.
Wednesday yet,
So I don't know. I don't want to rock the vote or sound pessimistic.
Okay.
But I'm saying Kano has about 12 to 13 million population, and you are sending 100,000 bags of rice. Is this going to be a weekly thing? Is it going to be a monthly thing? Is it going to be a quarterly thing? Don't even forget about the sharing. The sharing without any contradiction, you can easily say who will get distance. That maybe knows one of the women leader of the ruling party.
There's something with Nuruddin, because the other day he accused me of having 3 cars and coping with the fuel subsidy. And now he has alleged that you know someone. Well, I hope you know someone. So the palliative gets, to
this
Nigeria.
This is the reality,
Yeah, Madam Nuruddin, talking about the sharing, because most Nigerians, but let's just work with some Nigerians are of the opinion that they don't even want these palliatives because they are sure that it would not even reach them. They said that they've seen, previous situations where palliatives did not reach the person that it was intended to reach. And we're talking about the poorest of the poor. So what's your take on this? Can the government reverse these decisions that they made?
The governors majorly have failed their electorate, and you are giving this thing to the governors again, and just 5 billion. Logistics alone, and government. Today, just go to you'll see the news, you'll carry it, that XYZ state has set up a 100-man committee to share the 100,000 bags of rice to 5 million people and what to feel. So that is it. I think from the COVID incidents, COVID is a private sector thing, but unfortunately, they channel it through. Let me give an example. Let's take one of the big players, Dangote. He's a key guy in the COVID something.
Of course.
They gather billions. In Kano, he built is it 300 or 500 bed
capacity center
that nobody used. The other guy, for instance, I'm not saying maybe Alhaji Aliko did not do the other, but the other guy, Bua, we saw trucks moving into the densely populated areas in Kano, sharing
items
directly to the people. Yes, there will be scramble, but at least the real people will get it. There are instances, we see it on news, a senator holding treated mosquito nets, or some of the lawmakers, they were given to them free, selling them in the markets. And this is at the higher level. Not to talk now, you give it to the ward executive, who will now pack 1/3 or more than half of it inside his house before he selects who to give. We saw what happened during the COVID sharing of those things. Very pathetic. Therefore, what the Tinubu should do, he should learn from Buhari. Let me take Kogi State, for instance. Kogi State is not paying salary up to now. They are still owing pensioners, owing this, owing that. Do you know how many bailouts, chains of bailouts, was given to them by Buhari? Yeah, during Kemi Adeosun, there was even guidelines. You have to tell us, you have to do a return, how you spend it and what to feel. When Buhari came, he gave them because they are owing salaries, high inflation, out of it. Until he left, some of the state governors they are paying salary pro rata. It's 15,000, now you'll get 3,500. Next month you'll get 2,500. So that is it. Tinubu should learn from it. If there is a way, Jonathan government did SUAP, just like Abacha did PTF. PTF, at least during our time, that it was, it is one of the most transparent, so to say. Because when you go to school, we had PTF books, you have PTF medicines, you have PTF beddings, and what have you. So I think we should move towards that. Involve more stakeholders that are non-government actors. Get community leaders, religious leaders, youth and women groups, CSOs, to manage this at least. Yeah, the government should be there, but don't hand it over to politicians. No matter how small it is, they can still, the lawmakers at the federal and state, they can still hold a bag of maize, even though they don't eat it. It's in their blood, with all due respect to them.
Okay, with all due respect to them, let's now go back to Kano and continue talking politics. Bribery allegation hits up Kano Election Petitions Tribunal. What's going on in Kano?
So you see, what I saw the news, I said, it's not new if you know who politicians are. They can do anything. And when I say politicians, irrespective, thank God, they are not even ideologically inclined.
Okay.
If Mr. Segir contest for this and he didn't get, the next day he can move to the other party.
Okay, not this Mr. Segir anyway.
It's no loyalty. Mr. Segir is not loyal.
Okay.
So we are not loyal to our parties. We are just loyal to our grit and what have you. it's very possible that one group is envisaging that, okay, this judgment may be blah, blah. So let's do this. But a senior advocate of Nigeria to approach a tribunal member for bribe. They have sophisticated ways of doing that.
Okay, so let's just put a peg on it there because
it's going to take deep.
So, Malam Nuruddin Abdullah, editor of 21st Century Chronicle, I want to thank you very much for always coming on the program to share your perspective.
Thank you very
on
much.
the issues. You gave the governors quite a bit of knock today, and we do hope you would come back with such firebrand next time we call to share your perspectives.
Thank you.
As issues.
Yeah,
develop. Thank you so much once again.
Thank you.